I really did think that in some parts of the UK, people would still be wearing those Victorian dresses, and because in Eritrea, in the city, everyone is very modern and dresses the way we do. But then when you go to the villages, you have like people wearing traditional clothes. So I thought that would be the same here.
Adïam Yemane has a modern twist on combining her Ethiopian and Eritrean heritage with her British identity. This is Writer's Mosaic, What We Leave We Carry, the series that tells the true life stories of migration to the UK.
I was born in Ethiopia, and when I was 5 years old, I moved to Eritrea. And so I say I grew up in Eritrea and moved to the UK when I was 12, so I always say I matured in England. My early memories are more based in Eritrea. I actually remember on the way there, I moved with my grandmother because my mum and dad split up, and my dad's family offered to raise me until my mum was a little bit more settled in life, because they were young and still sort of kind of making it in life. I remember being on the plane with my grandmother and me being like really hyperactive, and the hostesses having to follow me everywhere. And then when we got to the Eritrean airport, the one in Asmara was still being made, and I was like running around, and I fell off something and hurt my knee. Yeah, and and I remember that being my first experience of being in Asmara, which is the capital city of Eritrea, where I lived with my grandmother, grandfather, and my dad's siblings. And about a year later, the war between Ethiopia and Eritrea started again. So there was a sudden stop to any contact between the two countries. So I lost contact with my mother then. And that's when actually my grandfather and my dad permanently joined us, because everybody got deported. Everyone who was Eritrean who lived in Ethiopia got deported from Ethiopia to Eritrea. So my dad's side of the family, even though they are Eritrean, they were living in Ethiopia. So my dad was born in Ethiopia and he grew up there. So did all his 9 siblings. And we had started migrating to Eritrea a few years before this war started again in 98. Actually, how we moved was my grandmother said she had a dream. I don't remember what the dream was, but she said, we need to build a house in our country. And so they had already started building this house that's still there. And we was living there, and my grandfather and my dad got deported in 98 and joined us. So I moved in 97, they moved in 98. Eritrea was colonized by Italy and then by the Brits. It was then given to Ethiopia for it to be united. And so there was a time when Eritrea and Ethiopia was one country. It was some form of colonization. And so King Haile Selassie was the ruler at the time, and Eritrea and Ethiopia used to be one. But before that, it wasn't. So that was at the time when I guess my dad was born. So there was loads of Eritreans who lived in Ethiopia, and then loads of Ethiopians who lived in Eritrea at the time, and there was, loads of movement between the two countries. In 91, Eritrea got independence from Ethiopia, and then in 93, it became its own country again. So I moved from Eritrea to the UK when I was 12 because my family wanted me to have a better opportunity when it came to education, because in Eritrea, when you finish grade 12, you go straight into military service, and you do the following year as you are being trained as a soldier. And if you don't pass that year, then you are kept as a soldier. I was never an academic and I was always a creative, and there's no really much room for that in Eritrea. So my dad really wanted me to come to the UK and have a better opportunity. And also my mother was already here and he wanted us to be reunited. My mum came to the UK through a scholarship, and when the borders between Ethiopia and Eritrea closed, we lost contact for many years. I think it was about 8 years, until she found me again, which was, I think, in the early 2000s. And the reason why she took the scholarship was so she can gain contact with me again, because you couldn't make phone calls or travel between Eritrea and Ethiopia. And so when this opportunity came for her, she just took it and came to London. I got here and I remember we got the train to Victoria, and I came out and the first thing I saw was the Wicked poster outside of Victoria Station, and I was so shocked. I was like, what is going on here? I remember falling in love with the Victorian style architecture and just seeing the old buildings, because I really did think that in the UK, in some parts of the UK, people would still be wearing those Victorian dresses and, garments. And because in Eritrea, in the city, everyone is very modern and dresses the way we do. But then when you go to the villages, you have like people wearing traditional clothes. So I thought that would be the same here, So when I saw those buildings, I was like, okay, where are those people wearing those? There was a lot of shock, because we are fed a lot of American media in Eritrea. So, for example, those old sort of medieval films is what I always associated the UK to be like. So really cold and grey, and I wasn't wrong. It was really strange because I think because both countries speak English, you assume that they'd be similar. So even in the cultures that I was into, like hip hop and I used to listen to a lot of hip hop and R&B. And so coming here and listening to grime, I was really shocked. I was like an MC, and I was like, I don't know, I just didn't expect it. And I thought it was really stiff compared to like American, which is very, relaxed. And it took me a little while to adapt to the culture here because I was very Americanized, I guess. For example, things like, people wore their clothes properly here, which I really enjoy now. But, when I was 12, seeing Americans with like really large t-shirts, we used to do the same thing, really large trousers and t-shirts, and seeing people here with a little bit more tighter clothes, I thought, I was really shocked actually. But then I became part of that culture as well. That's why I like to say I matured here, because I came at the age where I felt like I was a sponge and I was really taking on things. Within a year of being here, I sounded very British. It was really easy for me to pick up the accent and the culture and being in school, I really needed to do the code switching quickly because, it was difficult being an Ethiopian in the UK in high school, because I came here and started in year 7. And I remember some of the things the kids said, which was like, so you're an Ethiopian, you must be able to run then. And is there still famine in Ethiopia, and questions like, how come you're not skinny then? Which I actually found really funny at the time, because I knew that there were so many different types of Ethiopians and Eritreans. We, of course, weren't living, they were talking about the famine that happened in the early 90s, late 80s. So instantly I realized that I knew more and I knew better, so I think this is what makes me think about travel being a huge part of one's learning, more than what they can teach you in school. Because a couple of months later, they did start teaching us about the famine in Ethiopia in history. And I remember everyone, as soon as it was break time, everyone came to me for questions. And I'm like, I didn't even live through those times. And give thanks, like my family did well. And so we lived a really good life, actually. I was living with my dad's siblings, as I mentioned, and there was quite a lot of them. And it was rare for us to all be in the house, but most of the time there was at least 6 or 7 people in the house, and they were all into different things. So I had an uncle who was really into reggae. I had an uncle who was really into like 90s hip hop, like Tupac, Biggie, Big L, Run DMC. And then I had like an auntie who's really into like pop, so she would listen to Blackstreet Boys and stuff. Very rarely we would listen to Ethiopian and Eritrean music as well. I think I was actually more into Eritrean music because I was the youngest one to move there. The youngest one of my dad's sibling who I lived with was 8 years older than me. So they were all quite mature when they moved. So I was the one that was really immersing myself in the Eritrean culture. You know, I was in school and hanging out with the kids. So I was listening to Eritrean music. So when I came here, I was still, you know, listening to that. Like I was really into Boyz II Men at 12. So I really loved like slow jams and R&B as well. And yeah, I was a fan of Usher, Beyonce, and then Rihanna. Actually, Rihanna was big at the time that I moved here. So I remember her being a big part of my transition. But the artist that really got me into grime or UK hip hop is Gets. Because of the energy he was able to transfer through his music. For the past 20 years of living in the UK, I've really been immersing and learning the UK and British ways. And I recently went back to Eritrea after 20 years. And listening to some of the songs and being in the same place really reignited that fire. And now I'm a lot more in touch with that music and listen to it a lot more than I did in the past 20 years. And I think when you go to a new place, you spend so much time learning that, and then there's like a 360 do where you reconnect to your roots, and then you can make the choice of what parts are part of your identity, you know, because it's all kind of part of you. You want to feel like you belong where you're living, right? So I'm constantly learning new things. Even though I've been here 20 years, I feel like there's still so much more to learn about these islands. So that's what I've been, I guess, more focused on in the past 20 years. And now I feel like I know it enough and feel like I have a sense of belonging. I've regained that part of me, which was kind of lost, but kind of also just kind of preserved. Food has always kept me in touch with my roots and my culture. I think I've been someone who's always seen myself as an Eritrean Ethiopian woman, even when others might disagree, because I have just blended in so much and adapted so much of the English ways. So for example, most Eritrean Ethiopian people, or loads of people who migrate from that part of the world, would stay around, you know, people from that country, go to that, you know, very much still in touch with the community, but I wasn't. But at home, I would always eat injera, which is actually a dish that's made in both countries, Ethiopia and Eritrea. Yeah, and I love it. And it's something that I've always been connected to. And in recent years in the UK, it's found its popularity as well. So when I tell people I'm Eritrean Ethiopian, the first thing they say is, "Oh, I've had injera and it's delicious." And, you know, because we have also a huge selection of vegan dishes. So it's definitely a lot of people's favorite. I can make injera, but it is a longer process, and I think it suits more when you have a family and you're making a bulk of it because of the process. But I usually buy injera and then I make the stews at home. The day I moved was so sudden actually, because it was really difficult to get visa, and I knew I was traveling soon. But the day I moved, we didn't know, and it just happened to be that there was a flight that day, and the next one was full, and the one after that would mean that my visa would have expired. So I was actually in the hairdressers the moment I found out. I was in the hairdressers, getting my hair done, thinking I'm traveling in a few days. And my auntie Helen came, and I remember hearing her car like outside the hairdressers because she was just like rushing to come get me. And she told me that I was traveling that night and asked the hairdresser to just I was getting cornrows, or like straight cornrows to the back. And I remember she had started like really small ones, and in the middle they were all large ones because she just needed to finish rapidly. And so when I came back home, already my grandmother and aunties were packing my clothes. And I remember them going, "You don't need this, you can buy it out there, you don't need." So loads of my things I actually didn't come with, just like certain essentials. But one thing that came to mind there was a necklace my dad bought me, which I still have. It's a Toardo Orthodox cross, so it's something that actually is part of my culture and religion. People from Eritrea and Ethiopia, when they read me by the cover, they just assume that I'm very Europeanized because of the way I walk, talk, and dress. But when you see me at home, I'm actually really, I don't know, very domesticated in a way. Just like the way I clean a house and stuff, and cook, and are able to kind of like make all the traditional foods. That was what shocked my family when I went back, because their first impression of me was that I was going to be really picky with food, and maybe not even be able to cook food that are traditional. But I was able to do all those things. And I remember my grandma made a comment, "Do you even live in Europe?" And I guess I'm good with accents because I was also able to I speak the language fluently, and my accent is still very strong. So they were really surprised and shocked by that. I am British on paper. Whether I consider myself British or not, it's something I still need to think about, because I've only just got my British citizenship in the past 2 years. So I'm a new British citizen. So I do feel very English. I've lived here for most of my life now. It is where I feel most at home, but whether it's where I feel more nourished or not, still figuring that out. And that's just due to culture and just more sun. Leaving Eritrea, I knew I was never going back because of the system, and Eritrea being under dictatorship and not having many members of my family in Ethiopia. So I claimed asylum in the UK, and my application process took a lot longer than it should. And so I didn't have any status. I was under refugee status for the past 18 years, until I got my British citizenship in 2023. And I actually got my indefinite leave to remain in 2018, but I didn't apply for British citizenship until 2023 because I had a travel document I can travel with. That was really difficult actually, but it was easy to get. It was £70, but it looks like a passport, but it's not a passport. So whenever you're in the airport, they're doing triple checks, they're calling immigration on you and just making sure you're legit. And and then when you're coming back into the country, you're given fingerprints. But I took my time with applying for a British passport because it's really expensive, and whenever I had that money, I would just choose to travel with that money, and just go through that process. I also needed to do a test, which is a Life in the UK test, which actually seems really easy, but they're really interesting questions, because they will ask you things like, oh, what do British people eat for Sunday roasts? Chicken and chips, fish and chips, or roast chicken. Or they'll ask you, who was King Henry's third wife or something, things like loads of British-born people don't even know the answers to. So I did that test, and then I did another test, which was my English speaking and listening test, which was really funny as well, because you go into a room and you put on a headphone and you have a conversation with someone, and she heard me speak for about a minute or two, and she said, "You know what, you're good to go." And then I paid £1,330, I think it was around that, and got the British citizenship. The UK does nourish me in some ways, I guess, because of the people that I know and people around me. So I do feel nourished in the UK. When I went to Eritrea, I really felt like it was a place that I was going to spend a lot of time there. But I don't see myself moving there, because I also know that I have got this new ways of living that's probably not going to work out there. I do see myself maybe doing 50-50, 50 here and 50 there. If I do start a family, that might not be the case, but I do see a life here, but with a lot of travel. Eritrea, I'm really interested in, and Ethiopia as well, actually. I'm really interested in regaining a sense of belonging there as this new me, because as much as, I was born and raised there, I'm a whole new person now, and my interactions to those lands are going to be different. And even though I was going back, when I went back, I was really trying hard to show that I haven't lost my ways. Within a couple of weeks, I said, "You know what? No, actually, I'm okay being a bit different, and I'm okay being a bit European, because I think I didn't want to feel a sense of shame from people's reaction." I did find it difficult, I think, but when you're a young teenager, I think you are really resilient. So I don't have memories of really dwelling on that, but I think there was a lot of difficulty just, finding friends and language. And even though I spoke English well, there was a lot of nuances that I would miss. And I did miss my family, my dad and his siblings, but I was just getting on with it, really. Yeah. When I first moved to the UK, the first place I lived in was Brixton. And I remember seeing the market and really feeling like I was back in the continent, but really just shocked in a way, because it's not how I imagined Europe to look like. So at the time, I remember finding the busyness and all the hustle and bustle really overwhelming, which later on actually became one of my favourite places in London, because I think when I first moved, I wanted new, I wanted something fresh and something I'd never seen before. But then seeing that, I was like, okay, we're back to here, we're back to this again. But then not long after, it really became a place I went to for that sense of home, and also a place where I went to get loads of food. So after living in Brixton for a few months, I got moved to Orpington, which is the outskirts of southeast London and the beginning of Kent. And there it was a predominantly white area, and my school was predominantly white. So I did get some racial altercations. So there was a lot of that in my school, until a school further up more towards Croydon got closed down, and that was a predominantly black school. And until they all moved to my school, I really struggled finding a sense of belonging there, because even though I had two friends, Molly and Mel, and they used to listen to rock music, so I had this phase where I was like, trying to blend in, and would listen to rock music with them, like Fall Out Boy and My Chemical Romance. And I used to be a skater chick. Molly was an emo, and Mel was a goth. And then in year 9, the predominantly black school closed down, and loads of black people came to my school. And then I started to listen to music that I really enjoyed again, and found friends that really appreciated my hair and style and things. So I started to slowly gravitate towards something that felt more true to me. But I really do enjoy looking back to the phase, to my rock phase. I don't have many Eritrean or Ethiopian friends. I have two. I've met Puli when I was 17 and her partner, Daniel. And I remember a mutual friend telling me that she was friends with these two Habesha people, and she hung out with them and they were into similar things that we was into. And I remember being really shocked. But prior to that, I didn't have many Ethiopian or Eritrean friends because in Orpington, there was hardly any black people, let alone Ethiopian and Eritrean people. I remember in my school, there was just one Somalian guy and me, who was from East Africa. So I wasn't exposed to the community. Now that I feel like I'm on that path of connecting with my roots, I also want to find the community here. There's a community here who's very rich with the culture and are very connected to the culture and the traditions. But I don't feel like I really belong to that community. I think there's this term that we are exploring, me and my friend Michael, at the moment, which is like modern Habesha, which we feel like we belong to. I think there's a subculture there being created because we're very into our traditions and culture, but we're also very Europeanized, I guess. So yeah, I think there's something being birthed there.
Adïam Yemane was talking to Jazz Grant.